Hi, this is David for 10 on Tactics, brought to you by tacticsandtrials.com. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel and to hit the like button. Please leave any questions or comments below. Today we will review the case of Scott v. Smith, 109 F.4 to 12/15/2024, from the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, which was decided on July 30th, 2024. This case represents a significant ruling on qualified immunity in excessive force cases involving mentally ill individuals. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals partially affirmed and partially reversed a district court's denial of qualified immunity to Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department officers in a case involving the death of Roy Scott during an attempt to get him to a medical facility for treatment. Roy Scott, who was in mental distress, called the police for help. Officers Kyle Smith and Theodore Huntsman from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department responded. Viewing the disputed facts in the light most favorable to the plaintiff's decedent called 911, complaining of men armed with weapons, indicating Scott was experiencing a mental health crisis. Despite Scott complying with their orders to drop a club and the knife that was in his pocket and not being suspected of any crime, the officers used physical force to restrain him in order to handcuff him so that they could get him to a medical facility. They kept assuring him that all they wanted to do was take him to get him some help. Unfortunately, after the officers had restrained him, first against a wall and then on the floor, Scott lost consciousness shortly afterwards and was later pronounced dead. More specifically, according to the court, though he complied with the officers' orders and was not suspected of a crime, the officers initiated physical contact, forced Scott to the ground, and used body weight force to restrain him on his stomach for a total of 1 to 2 minutes. The officers temporarily used a portion of their body weight on a prone Scott's back and on an area near his neck during the restraint process as he fought with the officers who were attempting to handcuff him. The court said the officer used body weight compression on Scott's back and neck during and shortly after handcuffing him. While one officer restrained Scott's lower body, the other officer applied pressure to Scott's upper body. The court observed that body weight compression on a prone individual can cause compression asphyxia, capable of causing death or serious injury. The court noted that Scott was not suspected of committing a crime and was suffering from mental illness. The officer's objective was to handcuff the struggling Scott so that they could take him to a hospital. Scott's daughter Rochelle and a representative of Scott's estate sued the department and the two officers, alleging violations of Scott's Fourth Amendment right to be free from excessive force and Rochelle's 14th Amendment right to familial association. The United States District Court for the District of Nevada denied the officers' motion for summary judgment on the basis of qualified immunity for both the 4th and 14th Amendment claims. The officers appealed this decision. The case was appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit reviewed the case. The court affirmed the district court's denial of qualified immunity on the Fourth Amendment claim, holding that the officers violated Scott's Fourth Amendment right to be free from excessive force. The court found that Scott was mentally ill, not suspected of a crime, and did not present a risk to officers or others, making the use of severe or deadly force constitutionally excessive. The court found that the officers' use of their hands-on restraint of Scott was the equivalent of deadly force. The court applied the factors relevant to excessive force analysis. Government interest. Because Scott was mentally ill, was not suspected of a crime, and did not present a risk to officers or others, the government's interest in applying force was limited. Reasonableness. A reasonable jury could find that the officer's use of severe or deadly force, hands-on restraint holds, was constitutionally excessive unless they could articulate the need for deadly force. The court also held that Scott's Fourth Amendment rights were clearly established at the time of the violation, referencing Drummond ex rel. Drummond v. City of Anaheim. Specifically, long before Scott's death, the Ninth Circuit clearly established that it is unconstitutional to use body weight force on the back and neck of a prone and unarmed individual who is in mental crisis. The law is especially clear where, as here, the officers know the prone individual is suffering from mental illness. It would appear that the court has now created a two-track approach to force applications, those in mental crisis and those who are not in mental crisis. However, the Ninth Circuit reversed the district court's denial of qualified immunity on Rochelle's 14th Amendment claim. The court held that while the officers violated Rochelle's right to familial association, that right was not clearly established at the time of the officers' conduct, entitling the officers to qualified immunity on this claim. Viewing the facts in the light most favorable to plaintiffs, The officers violated Rochelle's right to familial association. However, because that right was not clearly established at the time of the officers' conduct, the officers were entitled to qualified immunity. This case demonstrates the two-prong analysis for qualified immunity: whether a constitutional right was violated, whether that right was clearly established at the time of the violation. The court found both prongs satisfied for the Fourth Amendment claim, but only the first prong for the 14th Amendment claim. This decision reinforces the Ninth Circuit's precedent from Drummond v. City of Anaheim regarding the use of bodyweight compression on prone individuals, particularly those experiencing mental health crises. However, in this case, the court went further than Drummond by articulating that a hands-on approach may be found to be deadly force when encountering a person in mental crisis. The court observed that bodyweight compression on a prone individual can cause compression asphyxia, capable of causing death or serious injury. This has led to shifts in approach to mental health calls after federal court rulings, and some agencies finding themselves left without adequate protocols for mental health response. Scott v. Smith represents a significant ruling that reinforces constitutional protections for individuals experiencing mental health crises during police encounters. The decision affirms that the use of potentially lethal force on mentally ill individuals who allegedly pose no threat violates clearly established Fourth Amendment rights, while highlighting the evolving nature of 14th Amendment familial association rights in the qualified immunity context. The case underscores the importance of proper training and protocols for law enforcement when responding to mental health calls, particularly regarding any restraint techniques that may cause compression asphyxia. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week for our next legal update.